Sorry, that was loud. I believe everyone's here. I believe everybody had the opportunity to stretch their legs. We're now full and ready to listen. And we have a very exciting panel coming up. To begin with will be Dr. Marta Botiková, who is a professor of ethnology at the Department of Archaeology and Cultural Anthropology at the Faculty of Arts, Comenius University in Bratislava. Her main research interests are family studies, ethnicity, gender studies, and visual ethnology. She has lectured at universities in Europe and the United States. She is a member of major professional associations and editorial boards. She has published in both Slovak and English, and her personal bibliography has more than 300 entries.
Those are various entries, so don't be afraid. Actually, I will still use a few minutes to confess in front of you that I am quite shy of your and my different situation. As far as I have heard about the researches in process, about the researches which you start right now, and so I am quite getting to the end of my research career, but I'm afraid that I still don't know the answers, so please be patient with me, and also excuse me for this cheating paper. It is just to keep me in time, so that you see also the next slide, and I see it, that it's coming, and what I should be speaking about. So, thank you very much for this invitation. Yes, I am. This is not my first time in Ljubljana, but first time at the history department, and I am very happy to be here. And let's start with my paper. The one-child family pattern used as a simplified metaphorical term for a type of restricted reproduction, or at most simple reproduction, describes the regulation of fertility rate or the birth rate, which was a significant occurrence in municipalities in central Slovakia in the interwar period, mostly in between the 1920s and 1930s, and was recorded in demographic sources and ethnological surveys. We are dealing with a phenomenon which is not an accidental decision made by parents on the number of their children. It is a method, or I consider it a method of controlled fertility, which was used more or less within the whole community at that time, accompanied by a complex system of procedures and values which supported it. It is also a strategy, namely focusing on activities to achieve a particular goal, not only for a present moment, but also for the future. So I'm going to deal with that. We are speaking about very close nations, very close cultures, but even if we were in one block, or if we were in one kingdom, so it was always different, and especially the Habsburg Empire, the Western Austrian part and the Hungarian part, so Slovakia was the part of the Eastern Habsburg monarchy, or the Austro-Hungarian monarchy later, and belonged to this sort of Central Eastern family type or family part. yes, there are all the sources, all the data speaking about the restricted birth rate, and yeah, not only demographic data, but also ethnological data prove this situation. I would like to introduce mostly those ethnological data. What did that mean for the local community? What did that mean for the group of the local people? There were various subjects to prove the process. Maybe the most sorrowful were the cemeteries of those villages, where we find on the tombstones the names and dates of young women dying instead of giving birth in the non-professional interruption procedures, just to fulfill the pattern which was in to be the demographic pattern of the society. Sorry. So I will focus on the impact of historical, cultural, religious, and economic conditions on the performance for having one child only by the married couple. In addition to the findings from literature and secondary sources, yes, I already told you, I built my arguments on the ethnographic research and on census archival research. I started to research this phenomenon in 1980s, or yes, early 1980s, and I came back, or I did after decades later. I visited again those villages and did another repeated research. That was not always with the same informants, as far as many of them already passed away, but I was able just to, at least I think I was able to follow the process which went under this system. So how the birth control is being interpreted, it's important to understand from the point of view of the Hungarian law, which we are the heirs of still. The state faces this system and the consequences of that in other ways. So, under the Hungarian law, there was never established the one heir only kind of inheritance system. This is very important to say, because that is very opposite to the law which was in use in the Austrian part of the Habsburg monarchy and in the most of the Western European regions. Also, in the same time, involving to this was after the revolution, 1848. I think it was 1853. The legislation that girls or daughters were legally established inheriting the family property. This never came into being really like 100%, but anyway, there was this possibility already. yes, the continuing inheritance system never recognized this sole succession, and the threat of impoverishment was really high, because by the right of the all male heirs, or even women, female heirs, the family property, which was in the modern system, in the capitalist system, just given and not enlarged by any landlord. You had only what you could have paid for. So this was just dividing to smaller and smaller parts, as far as all the children had the right to inherit family property. No certain benefits, and also playing together with the reduction of infant mortality made the people to start thinking about what shall they do with all those just stripes of land where they were just getting smaller and smaller. There is not one recipe for this. We see various solutions, and I would like to point to one of those, and that was the simple or narrowed reproduction, which appeared in Hungary since 1870s. We know that it happened mostly here in the western part of Hungary, in villages actually on the borderline with Austria, and excuse me my ignorance, but maybe even by Slovenia it goes so far south as that borderline. That time journalists, publishers called it a suicide of a peasant population, and already foresaw that this is not a good solution. Another solution, which was much more frequent, and especially in the most parts of Slovakia, that was the massive emigration. Massive emigration of the, we call it the workforce, but of men who emigrated around Western Europe, but mostly to overseas, to North America, which was also a kind of population regulator of that time, as far as men were not present. What's interesting, this solution of one child only was practiced mostly in the Protestant environment. That gave a sort of answer that those religions of the growing capitalism, those you know about Weber things about Protestantism, that they are pragmatic, and that they think about the well-being of the family, and decide for one child only. On the other hand, in none of those religious practices there is any dogma telling that birth control is required. And also, what we found in the sources, there were Protestant pastors fighting against the birth control, and of course they were losing the churchgoers, the part of the community, and yes, they connected it also, just as the first note says, with the wealth and the people who just want to live well without much obligations towards children. On the other hand, there are also in Slovakia we find Protestant areas where there was no birth control, and on the other hand, even Catholic and Orthodox villages, well, not in massive rate, but in certain segments, followed this birth control pattern. Here I brought two maps from the ethnographic atlas of Slovakia, but I'm not sure it is very, very clear. So on this map we see the dark ones. You see them, yeah. The dark places or regions are the regions which didn't practice the birth control, and on the other map there are the regions in South Central Slovakia and Eastern Slovakia, and then around Bratislava, Western Slovakia, where this birth control could have been found by support of a lot of evidence. Birth control did not mean that there was one child only. There might have been two children, and I will tell you later even more children. But here, this is a strong Catholic village in Western Slovakia, where it's clear that this family has two children only. There is a age difference in between the older and the younger child, but what did they depict on the picture, on the photography? We see, of course, all the showing off, all the wealth, all what they own, the horses, the servants, the whole property, the big house with fancy decorations and so on. What are the points which I would like to concern you on, and that was the low marriage age. There are two possibilities. Lower marriage age or high marriage age. In both cases, there must be a strong control of fertility, because the low marriage age brings the woman as soon as possible to her husband's house, and there she is a workforce, of course. While the high marriage age keeps the woman in her father's house, and she is the workforce there. So what's interesting, no society practiced both ways at once. And while we were doing the research, or while the data shows the low marriage age was used mostly in the Slovak villages, it comes with the protection against pregnancy and postponed parenthood. Yes, the family structure doesn't develop much. It's very simple and comes with the auxiliary local settlement of the young married couples after marriage. Here comes the proverb that sons-in-law are the last letter in the alphabet. I don't know how is it in Slovene, but zať je posledné písmeno v abecede. Son-in-law in Slovene? Z. No, tak rozumieme. So that's the last letter in the alphabet, and that symbolized his position within the family. On the other hand, he was needed there, however. I have even found by local settlement of the young couple, village of Mochovce. Maybe you have heard, maybe not. Mochovce is now doesn't exist anymore. That because it was a very good place to make atom power plant. Why? Because there were it was a depopulated village where really this birth control was practiced for generations. Separation from parents was during the lifetime impossible, and the hierarchy was very strong, and the old parents still kept property. You are nothing here, you are just a servant, says the 80 years old father to his 60 years old son. Even there were villages where some of the ethnographers, founding father of ethnography in Slovakia, Professor Kotek, found the inheritance of the name, of the family name, in the women's lineage. But this was not widely known. Here I would, we don't have time, but it might be a question for the millionaire. If you would try to draw this family pattern, this family structure. As far as we don't have time for quiz, it is just for you to know that this young woman and her family stay with her parents' family and with the younger brother. Everything is here. The age difference in between the siblings and the son-in-law needed in such a family. Another picture of those. Yes, by getting wealthier, of course, wealth have to be shown off. What for to be wealthy if the others don't know? It was very clearly showed in dress, mostly in women dress, and all the ornaments, all the fancy decoration. As I said, it was not always, of course, that one child only. I have a very nice quotation. Let me just read it for you. I was married when I was 14, but I gave birth to Luca when I was 18, because there was no one else to work here. But another, yes, here are techniques of postponing pregnancy, and the magical as well as real had to work. So mostly real practices were used. Probably there was infanticide. Of course, it is very hard to find data for this. If there was another child, it was a replacement of child which passed away, because child was the mother's entertainment. Yes, here is the. It was shocking to see all those deceased children's photos in those families. Yes, I've forgotten that I don't have the quotation. The first, it was Jano. The second might be Juraj. The third, Pavel. And the fourth, Ondrej. But it was a big shame when they had to have Ondrej in the family. Mm-hmm. So that was really very strongly sort of controlled. Splendor, architecture, clothing, enrichment, showing off. And the result is, just as I said already, the depopulation, the big houses, but nobody to come back to those houses, nobody to go to the cemeteries. I used to say to my students, this was not a choice. This system, that was not a choice for the women. That was the must. So, yes, that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very, very interesting paper. And yes, I agree, we should cooperate more. We were once in the same empire, and we don't know anything about this. So thank you so much for inviting us. Please. The next paper is by Dr. Victor Strazzeri, who is a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow at the Institute of Contemporary History in Ljubljana. His research examines the relationship between Communist Party politics and the feminist movement in the 1970s across several contexts, mainly in Italy, Spain, and Brazil. On these topics, he has published several papers. These were the result of postdoctoral fellowships at the universities of Bern and Geneva, and a residency at the Swiss Institute in Rome. More recently, he was a postdoctoral fellow in social sciences at the Federal University of Sao Paulo, which included stays at the University of Alicante and the Institute of Contemporary History earlier last year, and the International Research Center for Cultural Studies in Vienna, where he was a research fellow earlier this year. Please.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much for the introduction, and thanks to the organizers for the opportunity of participating in this great conference. So my goal today will be to present some aspects of this research project I've just started in the beginning of September at the Institute of Contemporary History here in Ljubljana. Over the past 5 years, I've been researching gender relations in the communist movement, as well as its relationship to feminist struggles across a variety of contexts in the aftermath of 1968. So the co-presence, let's say, of second-wave feminism and a still strong Communist Party culture in these countries. My current focus on communist women's reproductive politics is, however, fairly recent, so my aim today is more to present you my framework and goals, as well as some of the sources I'll be working with in regard to my Italian case study, which is the main case study. My Marie Curie project is titled Red Femme, and you can find more information on this Horizon Europe page you see on the screen. I'll be working with Marta Botiková and Marta Botiková here in Ljubljana, as well as with Marika Tolomei in Bologna. All your comments and criticisms today are therefore highly appreciated. But before addressing my topic proper, Italian communist women's social conception of motherhood in the 1970s, I want to address the recent development that provided the motivation for me to undertake this research. In April 2024, the European Parliament approved the landmark resolution on including the right to abortion in the EU Fundamental Rights Charter on close to a 2/3 majority. With this constitutional revision, parliamentarians aim to, quote, establish a safeguard in the context of backsliding on abortion rights in the EU and globally. They drew inspiration from lawmakers in France, which, as stated in the text of the resolution, had just become, quote, the first country in the world to explicitly make abortion a constitutional right. While this was a powerful statement by a key EU institution on reproductive issues, it also indicated important gaps in how they are approached at the European level and beyond. For starters, as many present here will know, Socialist Yugoslavia had preceded France by half a century in enshrining reproductive rights into its 1974 constitution. As we see on the slide, it states that it is a human right freely to decide on the birth of children. That lapse is significant because Yugoslav innovations on the sphere of reproduction go beyond the legislative front. The constitutionalization of reproductive rights in 1974 was namely accompanied by a host of economic, health, and social infrastructure measures with the goal of fostering women's reproductive autonomy. This is made explicit in the additional paragraph included in the Constitution of Socialist Slovenia. It states that in connection with the realization of the right to decide, to freely decide on the birth of children, the social community guarantees the necessary education and appropriate social protection and medical help. This broader approach to assuring reproductive rights, which we will hear more about from Ivana later today, was not exclusive to Yugoslavia or the socialist world. Across the border in Italy, communist activists who played a key role in the grassroots campaign for legal abortion in the 1970s in the country also offered a more holistic view of reproduction. Through the slogan of motherhood as a social value, they stressed that decriminalization of abortion, achieved in 1978, was not enough. Society and the state had to guarantee the material conditions for women's right to choose, to make that effective. That more comprehensive framing is worth recovering because it converges with current calls to grasp reproductive issues as matters of social justice, not just of individual freedom. In other words, the call to bring into focus the social conditions indispensable for the exercise of reproductive rights beyond the enshrinement or defense of these rights. That a more comprehensive framework on reproductive issues is necessary to better inform both public debate and policymaking is one of the conclusions of a recent UN study on the state of the world population, which actually came out this year. I really recommend everyone to read it. It's very interesting. As we read in the summary, the report finds that, quote, the barriers to avoiding an unintended pregnancy and barriers to starting a family are often ultimately the same. Economic precarity, gender discrimination, lack of support from partners and communities, low quality sexual and reproductive health care, lack of access to services like affordable childcare or education, pessimism about the future, etc., end of quote. So from that standpoint, the authors of this study found that the inability of individuals to realize their desired fertility goals is the real fertility crisis, not overpopulation or underpopulation, and we see it everywhere we look. We see this frustration of individuals of, having reproduction as they want, as the real crisis. Which led the authors of the report to set a new goal, namely to foster reproductive agency, understood as, quote, more than just the freedom from coercion or improved access to services, but as the full range of conditions that enable people to exercise their reproductive rights and assure true choice, including gender equality, economic stability, decent health, and confidence in the future. This UN report, which is very rich in data and insight, is no doubt an important intervention into the current debate on reproductive issues, but it is striking how some of its conclusions echo the framework on family planning, which, for instance, two high-level figures, high-level Yugoslav officials on issues of reproduction and family planning, expounded on the topic in the mid-70s. So in a speech from 1972, Vida Tomšić remarked that, quote, modern family planning presupposes and requires liberation of women in all other dimensions of their social life as well, her economic independence, her equal rights within the family, and the possibility of her participation in political decisions. Along these lines, Nevenka Petrić understood family planning as creating better conditions for people to have the number of children they desire, from 0 upwards, right? So maybe fostering reproductive agency or autonomy is not such a new goal after all, just like the French constitutional innovation on abortion was just 50 years late with regards to Yugoslavia. So before I move to the Italian case in the second part of my talk, I think we can boil down this new old framework on reproduction to a few fundamental gestures. And this is something I think the debate nowadays could really use. Switching from what questions, such as what is life, or what is an ideal mother, what is the ideal fertility rate, and all the normative baggage that accompanies them, to how questions. How was the child conceived? How will it live? How will the mother be supported? How will motherhood be experienced? The question of material conditions of reproduction. And two, re-signifying reproductive freedom as not only the right to choose not to have children, which is crucial and must be defended, but also the right to have them if wanted. Italian communist women also proceeded along these lines in the 1970s, but in order to do so, they first made significant efforts to understand the conditions in which women were becoming mothers, having abortions, and experiencing their sexuality in the country at the time. So to give you a bit of context, in the mid-1970s, women activists in the Italian Communist Party were facing a new challenge to their policies, coming from a rising feminist movement. And I'm talking about the communists here because this is the biggest opposition party in Italy at the time, a party with more than 1 million members, which at this moment had its highest electoral numbers in the post-war history at 35%. So this is not just a fringe movement, this is the main left-wing party and opposition party. And of course now there's this new actor on the scene, feminist collectives and a very strong feminist movement that also characterized the political scene of the country in the 70s. So communists and feminists were, even though they had many tensions, they were allies in the legislative battle for decriminalizing abortion and worked together to defeat the right-wing Catholic opposition to advances on this and other elements of the gender front. It's in that context that the Union of Italian Women, or UDI, a majority communist but independent mass women's organization with hundreds of thousands of members, conducted a major survey on motherhood, sexuality, and abortion in 1975. The goal was understanding how women across Italy experienced these phenomena in a then also fast-changing world. Right? That's the title of this UN report. If the much more well-known Height report on women's sexuality, published around the same time in 1976, relied on 3,000 self-filled questionnaires by women in the United States, the UDI survey reached many more Italian women, around 30,000 throughout the country. It did so through various means. Small group meetings, mostly in the north, where the women's movement had a stronger presence, assemblies, 360 of them mostly in the south, in addition to 320 interviews in Campania, in the south. As the coordinators of the study remarked, a traditional statistical study was rejected since the problem was too complex and the resources too limited. But also, in order not to narrow women's scope of response or compromise their willingness to speak openly. In this regard, quote, the primary scope of the survey was not so much to record and compare a certain number of responses, but rather to create new occasions for women to meet, discuss their own problems, and search for solutions for them together. This led to an emphasis on small groups, which were generally composed of middle-aged working women with children. The assemblies, in turn, were more diverse and gathered, quote, from the 16-year-old student, very active in the discussion, who came with her mother, to the 80-year-old, who was mostly silent but very attentive, end quote. So just gathering the women in small groups proved a challenge, which highlighted their lack of time and accumulation of tasks and roles, whether they were homemakers or factory workers. Thus, the UDI saw the effort as more than a survey. It was a consciousness-raising event, and as such, quote, a road in which 1,000 pathways cross. Indeed, that plurality of viewpoints and life conditions and the challenge of gathering them in a coherent movement is frequently highlighted by the authors. Italian working women's relationship to motherhood and sexuality emerged as, quote, a mirror of 1,000 faces. So this really interesting survey that actually a movement undertakes was published in this book, Sesso Amaro, The Bitter Sex. Not very well known, but an incredibly rich source. Let's just see if this will work. Apparently not. I was going to play a video for you guys. And it doesn't seem that the PowerPoint is allowing you to do that. Anyway. Yeah. Okay, should we try this in the other way? Well, we'll have to skip the video. That was like the highlight of the presentation. Anyway, the question of how motherhood was experienced, of its material conditions, returned to the title of the documentary film Madre ma come, Mother but How. In this 1977 production from the Communist Party Film Company, directed by Argentine filmmaker Rosalia Polizzi, the policies of the Italian communists with regards to family making and abortion, as well as their ambivalences, are on full display. We would have seen a clip from the film, which, in the same spirit as the UDI survey, features many interviews and small group discussions with working class Italian women on various reproductive issues. The clip starts, so the clip we would have seen starts with a woman in the Roman periphery recounting how, having had 2 children within 16 months and having gotten pregnant a 3rd time shortly thereafter, she decided to have an abortion despite being very concerned for her well-being during the then illegal procedure. Afterwards, there's a title on the screen which shows the quote, "A woman is charged while 2 die from attempted abortions." And after that, there's a voiceover, and you can read the translation on the slide. What's most important, though, is the interplay between the narration and the scenes of feminist demonstrations shown on the screen. Should we try to put the video? Should we? We don't have sound or anything? Because I can maybe search, you know.
It's from
YouTube. Yeah.
So maybe just try to find YouTube
Okay.
and the film.
Okay,
That would be
so
the
let's
easiest
try.
way. Yeah, I think that's the easiest.
Okay. Can do I also have access here? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh. There it is.
Fingers crossed.
I think it is the right point that I want to show. Is after this.
Quello che penso che tutte le mamme vogliono dei figli, ho detto no, mi viene da fare, cioè in mezzo o la vita o la morte, no.
Just 1 minute.
L'aborto è un dramma, non è un reato, dicono le donne. Gli stessi che hanno bollato come criminale la donna spinta dalla disperazione a interrompere la gravidanza, nulla dicono contro condizioni di lavoro e di vita che provocano l'aborto bianco. È sempre la donna a pagare un prezzo pesante per la società che le nega le condizioni necessarie per una maternità serena. Va riaffermato sì il valore prioritario dell'educazione sessuale sin dalla scuola e della prevenzione, ma è giusto che ci sia una legge che aiuti la donna e non la colpevolizzi in un momento tanto drammatico della sua vita. Allora, come è andato?
Okay. That was it. And so we go back. So what she said, so what the narration said is that it's the line of the Communist Party that abortion is a tragedy, not a crime. And then the narrator says, the same people who portray as a criminal the woman driven by despair to interrupt her pregnancy say nothing about the workplace and life conditions that lead to miscarriages. Women are always the ones to pay a heavy price for a society which denies them the conditions for a serene motherhood. The value of sexual education in school and prevention must be reaffirmed, but it is fair that a law is in place which helps women instead of blaming them in a difficult moment of her life. So there are all kinds of ways of not saying openly abortion should be illegal. So some of the ambivalences, even though the communists were a very important force in getting the law passed. So what we hear is this cautious Communist Party line that deliberately avoids the notion of abortion as a right, but maybe the images tell another story. As Gianluca Fantoni has highlighted in his recent work, Italy Through the Red Lens, Madre Macome also provides a valuable visual record of the demonstrations organized by the feminist movement. The slogans on the protest placards are particularly revealing. La donna è una disoccupata che si chiama casalinga. Women are unemployed people labeled as housewives. Libera nella maternità, autonoma nel lavoro, protagonista nella vita. Free in motherhood, independent in work, protagonist in life. And the heroes, abortiamo la DC. Let's abort Christian democracy, the party in power. Another interesting aspect of the images of demonstrations we see in the film is the fact that they do not necessarily display communist banners and discourse. Hence, if communist slogan was that abortion is a tragedy, not a crime, we see banners calling for the liberalization of abortion, a formulation communists contested. Thus, as Fantoni concludes, the contrast between what we see on the screen and the voiceover, quote, neatly illustrates the difference in how abortion was interpreted by the feminist movement and the Italian Communist Party. Indeed, within the context of reproductive and gender struggles in 1970s Italy, this contentious but fertile interplay between movement on the streets and Communist Party institutions and the UDI somewhere in between emerges as another research topic, because despite these differences, somehow they managed to converge to the same goal and work together. Despite the many tensions and disagreements, this convergence, along with other progressive actors, not only these ones, was instrumental for a series of achievements on women's rights in Italy, from a law on public nurseries and family planning clinics, to the reform of divorce and family law, and finally, the decriminalization of abortion in 1978. Thus, my research on communist women's conception of motherhood, family making, and reproduction in that juncture will also reconstruct, through oral history interviews, the inner workings of the synergy between party, mass movement, and feminist collectives, a formula that we seem to have lost. And now just to conclude, as for the topic of this talk, the research has so far paid little attention to Italian communist women's conception of motherhood and understanding of reproductive issues. Scholars have legitimately given emphasis to feminist movement discourses and practice, since they fundamentally changed the landscape of gender struggles in 1970s Italy. That was indeed one of the conclusions of the UDI survey. As we read in Sassomato, one of the key findings was that, quote, the process of women's emancipation has gained an acceleration in recent years to an extent that is difficult to reverse. Contributing to the strong maturation of women's consciousness are objective factors, such as higher levels of education and broader access to information, but also subjective ones, such as the capacity to organize themselves as a movement and to unite in multiple struggles. So if we recall the UN report on reproductive agency that I referred to before, the importance of those subjective factors, the capacity to self-organize and combine multiple struggles, emerges as a major gap. Just like in the clip we just saw now, a more comprehensive understanding of reproductive autonomy can only have a lasting impact if it is embedded in a combination of collective actors which, together, and despite their differences, work to enact these rights and defend them against conservative and far-right challenges. But that is a topic for another talk, and I look forward to your questions and suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this already multi-layered research, and I think I can say for all of us, we're looking forward to the end result of your research. I would kindly ask Professor Botiková if she can join us, and we can begin with questions. I believe we have about, we have 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Who would like to go first?
Maybe were they ever asked how they did it? Did those women ever told how they managed to? So
Yes,
it was abortion or what?
Thank you for this question. I didn't have time to give those quotations. By the way, being one very productive researcher in the second third of the 19th century, Božena Němcová, she was the author, the Czech author, and would be a women's activist probably if that would be the situation. And she lived in Slovakia. Her husband was finance. No, this is not a good expression in English. He was working at the borders as a state employee, and they lived in this area. Božena Němcová didn't have so much to do, so she went to see the villages and spoke with women, and so they say, but this is not Božena Němcová, that was this quotation. I'm looking for that, yes, the rhyme there was na dvore rastie neťaťa, neboj sa nevesta dieťaťa. Neťaťa grows in the yard, don't be afraid of a child, right? That is Uniperus communa or Uniperus savina, which they used to for abortion. Or there were, of course, other practices. They say, yes, coitus interruptus, they called it like robia to dorubača, radšej beriem plachtu ako plienky, translate into English. V stodole žitko mlátia, pred stodolou žitko vytriasajú. Nečakaj na posledné pomazanie. They do it to the nightshirt. I'd rather wash a sheet than nappies. In the barn, they thresh the rye. In front of the barn, they shake it out. Don't wait for the last anointing. Like women, yeah, also men knew. But yeah, so there are some techniques known. Yes, the condoms were probably not of everyday use, that they were to be bought in the shop, so it would be expensive.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anna?
Yeah, I have maybe two questions for both of you. Well, the first one relates to the last questions. So, did they also mention some sort of abstinence, some sort of abstinence, or during the period? Or?
Well, the abstinence during the period would not help much. But that was not. That was not. Yes, but even this was probably not a good solution because it was not a healthy sexual life, and so various deviations were been speaking about, not only having a lover for men, but going to other villages, or even there were in all the literature mentioned sexual intercourse with animals. So solutions were.
And the other question, so how were these women that didn't have a lot of children depicted in the public discourse? Because in Slovenia, for example, in the more or less same period, maybe a bit later, the public discourse juxtaposed the selfish urban women with healthy rural families, women, and so on, that still had a lot of children. So here the situation reversed, where they also some sort of demonized, or how they were.
Let me quote informant. Well, the child was considered to be a woman's pleasure, and so as she was controlled not to have children, and when she had her fourth, the Andrew, which I call the names, so her mother-in-law told her, my pleasure, if I wouldn't have you, I would have to work. Yes, so the child was keeping the woman from work, and of course, the labor market, this was not the real modernity. There was not really the working force to be hired and offered money for that, or invest to the extra working force. The bride, the woman had to work, had to fulfill the part of the household as well as the farm work.
And for Victor, one question that came to my mind when considering again the discourse in the interwar period. How much was this, as you said, the ideas of Vida Tomšič and on the other hand in Italy about giving the women the protection, the possibilities to choose motherhood in one word or one sentence. How new were actually, because the same arguments were already present in discourse, especially from the socialists, already before that. But so I don't say that there was nothing new, because I have my ideas what was new. For example, this idea of a wanted childhood, which is who will not be a psychologically damaged child. This is something that doesn't come up before that. But this protection of mothers was something that was already very present in the interwar period in all women organizations, but especially the socialist ones. So maybe your opinion about that.
I mean, good question. I can speak more about the Italian case. I guess this in Yugoslavia's notion of right of the child to be wanted. I think is also a very clever twist on the right of the unborn child. Yes, it has rights, the right to be wanted. If it's not, then it shouldn't be born. Which seems like an innovation to face a sort of debate. In the case of Italy, it would be interesting. I would have to maybe look at stuff from the 50s where, yeah, communist mother, the figure of the mother is very central also for the communist movement. But then I think the challenge of the feminists has a big role where their discourse evolves. Where one place that I think is very clear is in the role of the husband or men and of challenging, the established roles. So I would say gender relations become more of a topic as opposed to just the mother and her task and her role, supposedly natural role, whatever. I would say in the 70s this becomes more and more central. And as a response also to the challenge of the feminist movement, which in Italy at the same time is doing the campaign for wages for housework and all of this. So the first reaction of the communists is to say that that's a Catholic demand, right? To keep women in the home, etc. And they will change this kind of a position, especially by going to these women and seeing how the situation is now. All the talk on sexuality that accompanies the topic of motherhood is, I think, more something from the 60s and 70s that is not as present in the 50s. But then, of course, you say this and then you go to the 50s and they're much more advanced than you thought. So I won't say this, but that's like my provisional answer. But it's a great question. How does this change?
Yeah, thank you. And another very obvious question, which is, I suppose, at the center of your research, the influences between Italy and Yugoslavia. Did they side either Tomšić or the opposite way or something like that?
Yeah, Chiara has worked on this and on the exchange, but more on how the feminists in Italy came here and what they took. But the dialogue between the parties has not really been researched yet. I haven't promised that I would do this in this research, but I'm pretty sure that it happened. And we're fortunate that the Italian Communist Party has an archive just of the women's section, so there are the sources for this. But I think also in the Trieste section of the party, somewhere where I'm going to look for this out, I can't say, but I'm sure because the fact that the communist women of Italy had integrated feminist perspectives from the movement circulated in the rest of Europe. Communists in Spain knew this, communists in Brazil knew this, that they were ahead. Now, was this also recognized in Yugoslavia, and what were Italian women saying about what was happening here? I can't say yet, but but ask me in 2 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will take this opportunity to stop questions here, and then we want to have a short break. So in 10 minutes, we go to our concluding panel. Thank you.